Miriam Elizabeth Rodriguez Martínez lived with her family in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, Mexico. But everything changed after her daughter Karen Alejandra vanished in 2012. She was kidnapped by a group of armed men from the Los Zeta cartel. They forced their way into her car and took off with her. The kidnappers demanded money from the family, and everyone in Karen's family followed the rules laid out by the cartel. They took out a loan to pay Karen's ransom and left a bag of money at a drop-off point after being overwhelmed with phone calls, threats, and demands. Karen didn't come home, however. Miriam contacted the authorities, but they were unable to take sufficient action. Therefore, she took matters into her own hands and initiated her own investigation to identify the perpetrators responsible for the abduction of her daughter. She even used aliases and disguises, such as dyeing her hair, and she even used a fake handgun and false identification in order to infiltrate the criminal groups. All of the details, no matter how small, were put into her black computer bag, where she was gathering clues to effectively track down the criminals one by one. Miriam was able to thoroughly investigate the cartel members' acquaintances, hometowns, and childhoods. After receiving a tip-off that he was peddling flowers at the border, she was able to track down a cartel member who she had been hunting for a year. After interrogating criminals he'd worked with and infiltrating relatives for tips on his location, she was able to find the group of vendor carts he was selling with. After interrogating criminals he'd worked with and infiltrating relatives for tips on him. After studying his photo as she scoured the area and dressed in nothing but a trench coat over her pajamas with a baseball cap, she finally laid eyes on her target. But the excitement of getting justice for her daughter meant that she got carried away and got too close, causing the target to spot her and run. The 56-year-old sprinted after him through the packed market and down through a narrow pass, eventually managing to grab him by his shirt and smash him up against the railings. She then jammed her handgun into his back. Miriam held the criminal for an hour until the police arrived, telling him, "If you move, I'll shoot you," according to family members who were assisting her mission. Her investigation led to the arrests of several men involved in the cartel, including Christian Jose Zapata Gonzalez, who was only 18 at the time. Miriam Rodriguez asked to meet with a cartel member because she had no other options. One of them agreed, to her surprise. Even though he wasn't sure where Karen was, he offered to help her out for $2,000. The payment made by Rodriguez went nowhere, but she also learned the young man's name, Sama. With a new lead, Miriam searched social media for hours before finally finding a tagged photo of Sama next to a woman wearing a uniform for an ice cream shop in Ciudad Victoria, 2 hours away. She then came and waited the store for weeks, learning about the woman's schedule and waiting for Sama to show up. When he arrived, she followed his companion to their home, taking note of their address. Afraid of being recognized, Miriam dyed her hair red and donned a uniform she had retained from her previous employment at the health ministry. She wore the uniform to conduct a fake poll of the neighborhood to obtain additional information about her target. Sama eventually found a police officer willing to join her in her mission, but by the time an arrest warrant was issued, she had left town. It was only until September 2014 that Miriam's son Louis, who had a shop in Ciudad Victoria, noticed Sama at his store looking at hats. The police was called and arrested Sama, gave the police the names of other cartel members, which revealed even more light on Karen's abduction. One person even agreed to take police to the ranch where Karen had been killed. Louis discovered Karen's scarf, a cushion from her truck, and one of her bones lay at the ranch. Miriam then resumed her search to find Karen's killers. In totality, Miriam Rodriguez would pursue 10 cartel members who had played a significant role in the kidnapping of her daughter. Many of them had left the cartel and attempted to start over as born-again Christians or flower vendors, but Miriam had little sympathy for them. "Where was his compassion when they killed my daughter?" she asked after one of the cartel members was arrested in a chapel, eliciting protests from the congregation. Miriam caused a stir in San Fernando. Not only was she going toe-to-toe with a powerful enemy, Rodriguez was also challenging a way of life. She appeared to be aware of the dangers of her work and commented that she had no fear of death. According to the New York Times, Miriam stated to a friend that she does not care if they kill her. "I died on the day of the murder of my daughter. I want to end this. I'm going to take out the people who hurt my daughter, and they can do whatever they want to me." In March of 2017, nearly 24 prisoners escaped the penitentiary in Ciudad Victoria, where Mrs. Rodriguez's efforts had put her daughter's killers. Worried, she asked the government for protection. The police said they sent periodic patrols by her home and work. Miriam broke her foot chasing down one of the last targets on her list, a young woman who had left town and begun working as a live-in nanny for a family in Ciudad Victoria. When the police finally arrested the young woman outside the home, Mrs. Rodriguez tripped as she ran toward them, fracturing her foot. Her attempts to avenge her daughter's death eventually led to her own demise. On May 10, 2017, Mother's Day, a white Nissan truck carrying men who had escaped prison slowly pulled up behind her, according to the police report. She was shot 12 times outside her home and died on her way to the hospital. Her husband found her body on the street, with her hand inside her purse next to her pistol. She was 57 years old. Her murder caused outrage, sorrow, and protests throughout Mexico and beyond. Thousands of people paid tribute to her courage and sacrifice. They called for justice for Miriam and all other victims. Her story also highlighted the risks and challenges faced by human rights defenders in Mexico, one of the most dangerous countries in the world for activists. The mother is now regarded as a heroine in her city, where organized crime often goes undetected. An officer, who chose to remain anonymous, who had provided assistance to Miriam in her investigation, recalled perusing the files of her independent inquiry, describing them as unlike anything he had ever witnessed, and stated that the details and information gathered by this woman, working alone, were remarkable. She had gone to every single level of government, and they had slammed the door in her face, he said, to help her hunt down the people who took her daughter. It was the greatest privilege of my career. Miriam would later form a non-governmental group of 600 families working to find their missing relatives, which is now run by her surviving son, Louis. Miriam was buried in a church-like structure lined with cypress trees. Karen was buried there too, beside her mother.